Hello, everyone. So it's the holiday season, and people are buying a lot more stuff. And part of that stuff is clothing. So today, we are going to return to looking at plus-size clothing and thrift stores and thin people buying oversized clothes. Let's begin.
This right here. It's in one ear and not the other. For all of you, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, they never stock my size and I'm not complaining. You think fat people are just complaining to complain. Huh. Yeah, here's the thing about stocking sizes. They're not stocking our sizes because they're not making them at all. You watched my entire original post, supposedly, and ran right to the comments to start an argument out of thin air. And you even said I even was just adding my own point to the argument. Like, your point had no place there. Why do you feel so f***ing entitled to speaking when you should just shut up and listen? Do you do this for every group of people or just fat people? Because you have a lot of self-analyzation to do. You're not that important, okay? You're not important in this conversation whatsoever, in fact. It is a privilege that you get to just buy what you like when it's in stock at the thrift or whatever. Y'all can't buy out the only plus size shit at the thrift. Say, well, I'm just buying what I want. You should do it too. How am I supposed to do it when you just bought out the only plus size option? Use your head. Use your head. Use your head. And again, let me loop back around too. They don't make clothes for us. Theretofore, how the f*** are they gonna stock them? God, like, thin people never fail to leave me flabbergasted at the lack of brain activity they possess. It is genuinely pathetic.
Okay, so she said it's a privilege to be able to buy whatever you want in a thrift store when it's in stock. No, it's a right to buy whatever you want if you have the money. If you want to buy a clothing item that's an extra small, you can do that. If a thin person wants to buy an extra large, they can do that. As long as you have the money to do it, you can buy the item. Thin people don't have any special privileges when it comes to buying clothes. And she also said they're not stocking our sizes because they're not making them at all. That's not true. This woman couldn't be any larger than a 2X, and almost every major brand goes up to that size. Going up to a size 3X is pretty standard for most brands nowadays. So this narrative that there's a shortage of plus-size clothes and brands aren't making plus sizes is a straight-up lie at this point. Even places like Target and Walmart have huge plus-size sections nowadays. And if she was referring to thrift stores not stocking plus sizes, then that's not thin people's fault. That's either plus sizes not being donated in proper amounts, or, as I said in other videos, plus-size clothing wears out faster than clothing that thin people wear. So a lot of that clothing can't be reworn or resold, so it doesn't end up in thrift stores. So again, it's not a shortage of plus-size clothing being made. She also said, how am I supposed to buy what I like when you take them? Okay, let me explain this in simple terms. Clothing in thrift stores is first come, first serve. You can buy whatever you like. She can buy whatever she likes. And if someone buys an item that you like before you get to it, then that is their item. And they didn't take anything from you or exercise any extra privileges by buying that item. And it's also not an entitlement for anyone to buy a clothing item, even if it's not their exact size. And if you didn't read the comment she's responding to, it says, the mall never has basic small to mid sizes in stock, and yet I'm not complaining. I just buy what I can when it's in stock or thrift what I like. That's a perfectly reasonable statement. And yet this creator said that they are speaking when they shouldn't be speaking on an issue they don't have a voice in, and said that thin people can be so brainless and pathetic for making comments like this. Honestly, it just seems like she has a huge amount of contempt for skinny women when they say anything. Like, I have a feeling any skinny person that says something she doesn't like would send her into a long tirade about how stupid skinny people are and how they never listen to fat people.
Let me be very f***ing clear on something, since you don't seem to understand. I could not care less what you do with your life. I do not give a f*** where you shop or what you buy there. I'm merely suggesting that when you're at the thrift store and you're looking at the only 5X in the store, that you keep in mind who that's really for and how inaccessible it is for the people that it's actually made for. You are literally just executing being upset that someone called you unethical. Like, I was pretty much just saying, you can't call us unethical for shopping at Shein when you're buying out our sizes at the thrift store. But someone's a little pissy about that, huh? Also, like, where did I say you can afford anything? I said you have all the options in the world, which means you have tons of affordable options besides the thrift, locally.
Okay, to start out, she said, I don't care what you do with your life or where you shop or what you buy. That really doesn't seem true. In the last video, she yelled at a commenter for buying what I assume was a plus-size clothing item, and this creator said that that person was being entitled for buying clothing that this creator wants. So I really do think that you care about what other people are buying. And she also said, when you're shopping and you see a size 5X, keep in mind who it's actually for. First of all, it's a thrift store. Anyone can buy anything. Period. Second, I've said before, and I will say it again, people who buy oversized clothing aren't buying sizes that are 3 or 4 times larger than their own. There aren't a bunch of size mediums buying size 5X pants. So her using 5X pants as an example isn't realistic if you want to talk about people buying clothes that aren't their size. Especially because this commenter said that she couldn't afford a lot of clothes, so she buys what she can. If you didn't read the comment, it says, no, just because we are thin doesn't mean we can afford anything. I've been every size I can imagine, and thrift shopping is just what I can do. So I think what this person is saying is that they buy whatever they can at thrift stores because it's what they can afford. But this creator's response is, you can't buy larger sizes because they weren't made for you and they're reserved for plus-size people. But if we're talking about thrift stores, they're made to make clothing cheaper and therefore more accessible to everyone. Or a lot of thrift stores are, not all of them. But originally, that's what their purpose was. So this commenter is saying that she buys what's financially accessible to her, and this creator says that only the accessibility of fat people is what matters in this situation. If poor thin people need to find cheap clothes, and those clothing items are oversized on them, well then too bad. You can't have them. They're implicitly reserved for her and people her size. That sentiment seems way more entitled than what this creator is accusing this commenter of doing.
And I am calling out the hypocrisy of it. It's my style, it's my style. Oh, it's cheap and affordable at the thrift. You can't tell me what to do. No one's telling you what to do. We're just suggesting that you don't buy out limited clothing options for bigger people. That's it. Y'all act like we're ripping away a human right from you, as if we aren't the ones being denied of accessibility to a human right. Clothes. Because for thin people, the thrift store isn't your only affordable local option. It's not. You can go to the mall and shop at any store in there. And while they might not all be as cheap as the thrift, you still have most of the thrift store as well. Why are fat people the entitled ones for wanting our options to ourselves? Like, I just don't think people hear themselves when they talk.
So she said again that she's not telling anyone what to do. But it still very much seems like she is, by saying that you're a bad person and unethical if you buy clothes larger than your size, and that you are violating fat people's human rights. I would kind of say that's you telling people, at the very least, what not to do, which is kind of telling them what to do. And she also said that for thin people, the thrift store isn't your only affordable option. That's also not always true. There are definitely times where there aren't a lot of cheap clothing items for a thin person outside of a thrift store, and there aren't a lot of small clothing options in the thrift store. For example, what if a poor thin person needs a winter jacket and they can't afford a new one, so they buy one that is too large for them in a thrift store? I know a few people who have done that because good winter coats are expensive, and in thrift stores they could actually afford to get one. I don't think scenarios like that are very rare. And even if a thin person wants to buy an oversized item because they like it, or they'd prefer to buy a cheap oversized item in a secondhand store rather than purchase a cheap clothing item from an unsustainable or unethical brand, then they still have every right to do that, and they're not being entitled. And I mentioned this entitlement because at the end she said, "Why are we entitled for wanting our options for ourselves? Those clothes are not yours. They don't belong to plus-sized people as a whole. They belong to the thrift store, and they are on the rack for anyone to buy that has money for it. You aren't entitled to clothes you haven't paid for, no matter what size they are." And she also said, as if we aren't being denied accessibility to a human right. There's so much to say about that. She mentioned in a previous video that because thin people buy oversized clothes from thrift stores, that she has to buy clothes from brands like Shein, which is known for being a cheap and unethical clothing brand. But even if that's true, you still have access to clothes. They may not be clothes from a brand you like, but you did acknowledge that it is a cheap, affordable brand. So your human right to clothing isn't being violated because you have to buy clothes from Shein instead of a thrift store. And also, that statement that she has to buy clothes from Shein instead of thrift stores doesn't jive with the fact that she said that clothing brands don't make her size. You clearly do have one cheap, affordable option for clothes. So overall, this idea that fat people are being denied accessibility to a human right because thin people are buying oversized clothes is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, if you didn't read the text on the TikTok, it said, "Me when I have laundry to do again, but I have 3 baskets of unfolded clothes." How does this woman make multiple TikToks talking about how plus-size options don't exist and her human rights are being violated by not being able to shop in thrift stores, but she has multiple baskets of excess clothing? Clothes that were so unnecessary to her everyday life that they were completely forgotten about between laundry days. Also, this is a side note, how do people have this many clothes? I've made many videos about fat activist creators talking about lack of accessibility to clothing for plus sizes, but every one of them seems to have an ungodly amount of clothes. How? First of all, that goes against the idea that there are no plus size clothing options available, but also, how do you just own that many clothes? I'm going to show you guys something. This is my dresser, the actual dresser I have in my bedroom. Every clothing item I own fits in this dresser. These 4 drawers are for normal clothes. This drawer is for socks and undergarments, and this drawer is for miscellaneous items. This is it. This is all the clothing I have. And I don't think I'm super extreme or limited when it comes to clothes. I have everything I need. I do laundry once a week, like I assume most people do, and I'm fine. And I only buy new clothes when the clothes I currently have are too worn to justify wearing in public. And all of this is to say, how do so many of these creators seem to have so many clothes? Where are they storing them? Do they have multiple dressers? Do they have massive walk-in closets? Or multiple baskets of clothes sitting next to their bed at all times? This is a real question because space is expensive. Square footage in homes is very expensive, especially nowadays. So where are all of these clothes being stored? I don't know if I happen to be reacting to people with way more clothing than the average person, or if I'm out of touch, or I'm just poor, but I don't get how people own this much clothing. Anyway, I'm shocked that this creator gets away with calling a poor, thin woman unethical for buying the clothes she can afford at a thrift store, and gets to make all these claims about not having plus-size clothes available and fat people's human rights are being violated because we can't find any clothes and brands aren't making our sizes, all while she has a huge amount of excess clothing in her size sitting around in her home that she doesn't even seem to use. But anyway, this narrative that fat people's lack of clothing options is a human rights issue is one of the best examples of a first world problem masquerading as a violation of human rights. There are so many brands that have plus-size clothing options nowadays. Almost every brand does. There are higher-end brands like Torrid and Universal Standards that have huge selections of plus sizes, all the way down to places like Old Navy and Walmart and Shein, like she mentioned, that also have a huge selection of cheap plus-size clothes. And all of these brands deliver to people's homes, which makes it even more accessible. So, I don't know. I don't understand how people get away with saying that plus-size clothes in the United States are impossible to find nowadays, let alone the claim that thin people buying oversized clothes in thrift store is a reason that fat people can't find clothes. It's all made up to have a reason to be angry at thin women for simply existing. And this woman's TikTok exemplifies that anger and hatred more than anyone else I have seen. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you in my next one.